No one's ever talked to me like that. I didn't know people were really like this. Yeah, yeah. And that's when I might cry about this, but
Hello, listeners. So I have a question for you. Do you miss your grandparents? Or are you lucky enough to still have your grandparents? Now, for those of you that have been following me for a while, you'll know that a lot of inspiration for the videos that I make came from my grandpa. And if you were lucky enough to have nice, kind, warm grandparents, then you'll know what it feels like to miss the time you spent with them as a child. The smells, the sounds of the house, that ticking clock, that noisy radiator, sitting on the countertop in the kitchen, licking the wooden spoon whilst Nana baked a cake. And I think if we could, we'd escape back to that moment, even just for a day. Well, today I am doing just that because I'm speaking to the internet's very own Nana, known to you as Chubby Vintage Nana, known to me as my good friend Diane. Diane, welcome. Yay! This has been a long time coming, girl.
it has.
I am
This is going to
so
be so fun.
It's going to be great because, as you said, offline, if there's one thing you and I can do, it's chat. And
Yes.
we're gonna have a good old chat today because I'm fascinated by you, and I also think you're bloody wonderful. So I just want to learn. I honestly, your content. When I found you, I instantly knew I'd found a friend.
Oh.
And you didn't even know me then, but that's the beauty of social media. You kind of feel like you
Mhm.
know the person on that
Yeah.
screen. I felt like I
Mhm.
knew you. And then when we did start connecting, I was like, oh my goodness, now we're going to have to be friends. So apologies for
Mhm.
that.
Well, I
um,
feel all those things you said, I feel the same
really.
way about you. So it's going two ways.
Oh,
So,
that's wonderful to hear. And like we were saying earlier, if only we lived closer and you could have come and done this in person or vice versa with a cup of
mhm.
tea, wouldn't that have been lovely?
Yes.
But who knows what the future may hold? Maybe just for a day we can
Oh,
meet in
wouldn't that
person and
be
have a good old chinwag.
lovely? I would love it.
I would absolutely love that. I wore my very best sort of vintage grandma core cardigan for you
Oh, I
today.
like it. I like it. The little popcorn stitch on the shoulders is very
Yes,
pretty.
very, very. This is very, and it's warm as well. And
Oh,
my
I
house
bet.
is cold today, so
Yeah.
this is needed.
Yeah.
And did you say it's snowing where you are?
Yes, it is. We had a big blizzard and it wasn't supposed to snow today, but it is still snowing. So that might affect my internet. We'll see.
We'll be fine. I'm sure we'll be fine. Well, thank you so much for doing this. As I said, getting to know you has been a genuine delight, and I hope to do it more in this podcast. And I want the people who watch you to get to know you because you make such wonderful, comforting, nostalgic videos, and they do so much for people and people's mental health. So I want to dive right in and start with the thing that you personify the best, the vintage. So how long have you been living and dressing vintage, and where did that start for you?
Gosh, it's hard to say like a specific date that I started. It wasn't like, you know what, I want to do this and then I went full bore into it. I think, even before I understood or even before people used the term vintage, as a child, I was always drawn to things from the 30s and 40s. And at that time, I didn't really even understand, oh, this is from a different time period. I just was absolutely drawn to it. And like, my dad had a book that he got when he was 3 years old. And it was called A Doll for Mitsu. And it was about a friendship between, uh, a Japanese girl and an English girl, and it was made in 1933. And I loved that book, and it was so precious. And so, as time went on, and like when I was a teen and a young adult, and was getting things to like furnish my apartment and that stuff, I would go to like rummage sales. And back then, of course, this was in the 70s, right? And so things from the 40s were considered like just like really outdated and tacky and just ugly, just so ugly. So I would go to these rummage sales and there'd be these beautifully embroidered pieces and these gorgeous sets of linens and everything else that they just couldn't give away practically. And so at the end of the rummage sale, they'd have a thing where you could stuff a bag for $1, and that's how I got a lot of my stuff. And
Wow.
yeah, and a lot of the things people say, oh, that's so expensive. You must spend a
Mm.
fortune on all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I bought it for probably cost me 5 cents back in the day.
Yeah, because nobody else wanted it.
Right, exactly. Nobody wanted it, and nobody saw the value of it. And we're the same way now, that
Yeah.
things are dated, and we don't see the beauty in them until enough time has passed, right?
Absolutely. I often say my nana, she's not nostalgic at all for the 40s or 50s. Not a bit. She's very much like, as soon as something looks a little bit dated, that's it. She wants to redecorate. She's obsessed. She's a bit addicted, actually. So I don't know where. I think it's all my grandpa. I think that's where I got this kind of homebody streak,
Right,
because
right.
he was big on comfort and things that he enjoyed, and he introduced it to me. But my nan, like you said, she'd have been in the camp of, oh no, that's outdated. We
Yeah.
don't want that.
Well, I
And what
love
about the yeah?
things like from the 70s and
Mm.
80s. I appreciate that other people see the beauty in them, but for me, I just no. And that's when I was a teenager. So,
I agree. I mean, obviously, I didn't see the 40s, I didn't see the 70s, I didn't see the 80s, but I've just spoken to somebody today who's got a huge appreciation for the late 70s, early 80s decor. I don't get it myself. Like you, it's just not quite vintage enough,
right,
really.
right.
And I just don't really, it just doesn't do it for me. And another thing that really, drew me in for the vintage is of course the fashion. I mean, you always look impeccable, and your beautiful dresses and the way you do your hair. What about dressing vintage? Have you always done that since you were a teenager?
No, I have not. I've always loved vintage things, and I would buy them, and I would kind of incorporate them into my modern dress. Like maybe wear like a vintage cardigan over, like my hippie jeans or whatever, that kind of thing.
Love
But
that.
you know what really did it for me, Hannah, was the pandemic. Okay. When the pandemic started, and, I obviously would never wish the pandemic ever, but
Mm.
there was a process at the beginning of the pandemic that was very freeing for me, because I realized that there were a lot of things. If I could live my life the way I truly wanted to, you always think that. Well, all of a sudden I
Mm.
could. And so I started, I was home all day. Nobody was going to come. I didn't have to dress for a single other soul. It was just me and Milan. And so I started dressing full vintage every day. And so it was funny because before I would dress vintage to go out, and I would feel very
Mm.
costumey, right? I would feel very
Mm.
self-conscious, like this kind of feels like a costume. But after I dressed full vintage at home for months and months and months, when it finally came time where I could go out again, it felt costumey to wear modern clothes, and it felt very
Oh.
much like myself to continue wearing the vintage. So,
Absolutely. And you make such a good point. And I've spoken about this in this podcast about those very formative pandemic years.
mhm,
Because, yes, nobody wants to see that
right,
kind of
obviously, yeah,
terror
yeah.
again.
hmm
But when the world paused,
hmm
a lot of people had a moment, a breather to concentrate on their domestic aesthetics because
Yeah.
everybody was at home. We
hmm
weren't going anywhere. So
hmm
you could actually have a look around and go, actually, what makes me happy? What
Yes.
feeds my
Yes.
soul? And there was a lot of discovery in the pandemic
hmm
years. And
hmm
that's why I started this podcast, because I noticed a lot of people were rejecting modern. They were
hmm
turning back the clock, and they were living vintage because they wanted to live in a simpler time, a less
hmm
complicated, a less terrifying time with maybe simpler standards. Now, of course, the 40s was not that. The 40s were terrifying all on its own.
I think.
But
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go on.
I,
No, go
I
on.
I
Yeah.
remember my mother saying, of course, and she did live through the 40s. She said the
Mm.
beginning of the pandemic, in those first maybe year, she said was almost the exact same feeling as back in the 40s. It was,
Wow.
there was this threat from outwards, and, and there was like the joining together, like everybody making masks and all this other kind of stuff, that a lot of that was to her was the same feeling. So, and I have that, I kind of, like we look back on the 40s and we're like, we love the fashion and the clothing and the
Yes.
aesthetic and everything like that. And I've had some people be like, that was a war. People died. People lived in hardship. Why are you glorifying it? And I'm not glorifying it. That back then, one of the things that we all admire the most about those people was living through such a horrifying time and finding joy and and personal style, caring about their personal style in the midst of all of that, right? So,
Absolutely. I couldn't nod more enthusiastically with what you're saying because I've been at the receiving end of it as well.
mhm.
I made an entire video about the comments I get where people are like, oh, so do you want to get bombed then? Oh,
Yeah,
so do you have rickets then?
yeah,
Oh, do you pee outside then?
yeah.
And it's like, I don't harken back to the
Hmm.
trauma of the
Right,
40s. What
right.
I admire is people's camaraderie,
Hmm.
their make do and mend attitude,
Hmm.
the fact that the gratefulness that they had
Hmm.
for what they had.
Hmm.
And like you said, even though they were going through such a traumatic time, to be able to put on that sort of brave face and
Hmm.
dress the
Put
way
that
that
lipstick
gave
on,
them.
right? Yep.
You know it, absolutely, absolutely. That kind of
Hmm.
that kind of in the face of danger, just kind of
Hmm.
giving it a bit of a, you know what I mean?
Yep,
And I kind of love
absolutely.
that. I
And I
love
love
that
that
about the
too.
40s.
That is, I
Mm.
even there's even a cookbook which I don't own. I would love to own it, but it's it's a cookbook from the 1940s, and it was a ration era cookbook, and it was about dealing with cooking within the constructs of ration. Which, of course,
Mm.
our rations here in the States were almost the complete opposite of your rations there. Um,
Yes, yes.
but and it was like retaining the fun of cooking. That was the whole
Mm.
thing. And so
Mm.
I did a rations experiment back in June,
I saw it. I
and
saw it. I watched it.
it was very harrowing, I will tell you. But
Mm.
uh and there were people that were like, this is ridiculous, you're making fun of the stuff that they were going through. And actually not, there were actually, cooking has always been, and food has always been a creative outlet for people, and eating has always been fun, right? So, and
Absolutely.
they
Absolutely.
and they were the same people. People back then were the same as we are now, and they wanted to still
Mm.
retain the good parts of their life as much as they could, even though they were in the midst of
Yes.
hardship. So,
Mm.
yeah.
I don't know why people get so upset, frustrated. Oh, I hate this word, but triggered by content creators bringing forward really incredible pieces of history.
Hmm.
Like we're glorifying, like you said, the word
Yeah.
glorifying it, or
Hmm.
even like sort of making light of it. We're
Minimizing.
absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
The
we
great
are,
thing. Mm,
I think it's because they just skim over the top of our content. They don't, it probably doesn't really, and I would say you can tell by their comments that they aren't very informed, right?
yeah.
So this isn't a subject that engages a lot of their emotional and cognitive energy. So they just
Yes.
sort of skim over it, and they're not looking at it deeply enough to hear us say we're honoring those people who went through hardship, and we admire them and we see them as role models, right? They're just looking at
Absolutely.
it from the surface. And also, I think, don't you think some of those comments, people just wanna make trouble?
You said it best,
Yeah.
Diane. Honestly, I read some of them and I'm like, you want me to react, don't you? You
Mm-hmm.
want me to get on my
Mm-hmm.
high horse and like
Yes.
make a whole video where I'm backlashing at you. It's
Yes.
not going to happen.
Yes. Right.
It's not going to happen.
Exactly. Exactly. It's been.
Although the idea that somebody has left you a nasty comment, I'm just like, give me their names. Nobody hurts our internet nana. Nobody, not on my watch. Not on my watch.
I get very, very few, very few. And I will tell you
Good.
something that's really interesting. You know, this
Yes.
is a whole nother subject, but you know who probably 98% of the hateful comments I get are from? It's from one demographic.
No. Who?
Old white ladies, like my peers.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. And I had such a hard time figuring it out, but I think I've kind of got it. I think, back when I was a kid, I was kind of a little weirdo. I'm sure that shocks you, right? But, and other girls were very unkind, as other teenage girls are wont to be, right? And I think that a lot of the time, those girls are very invested. You can cut all of this if you want, but they're very invested in the social
I want to
construct,
know.
the way things are. And so it serves them, it makes them feel more in to push other people out, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so what they'll do is they'll push other people out. They'll be very clear on, you're not okay. I'm
Mm,
I'm on in the in crowd, right? And they're still doing that, right? So those old white ladies are still telling me, you're not doing life right. You're not doing it right. You need to,
yeah.
cut your hair and color it, and you need to be wearing leggings and tunic tops and that kind of thing.
And I think what really gets them, because I've had this when I was at school, you had the popular girls that I just did not fit into because, like you, which I swear were kindred spirits. eh,
Excuse me.
it's okay. It may shock you. I was a bit of an odd bod as well. That's why I think we're kindred spirits. And I struggled with some girls being girls and trying to work out the hierarchy. And it still happens now. But what really gets them, what really annoys them, is when they see you having unbridled joy
Yeah.
from what you're doing, and then God forbid you get recognition for doing that. They hate
Yep.
that. That
Yep.
would be that's the worst for them.
Yeah, that I think that's very true. And I think a lot
Mm.
of the ones that come, not obviously not all, but the ones that comment nasty comments to me are very unhappy people. And I think
Yes.
it's kind of upsetting, or using like that word triggering, that I don't care for either,
Mm.
to them to be like, okay, I imagine their thought is like, I've done everything by the rules. I've done all the things that are supposed to make me beautiful and socially acceptable. And I'm unhappy, right? And yet here
Yes.
comes this fat glorpy lady who wears outdated clothes and doesn't have a man, right? All those things, and yet she's happy, and I think it kind of rankles them a little bit. I'm sure it's upsetting to feel like you're getting to the end of your life and you're not happy and trying to figure it all out. And then you see somebody else who's happy.
Done that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like my mum, she's never married. And we live in this beautiful 40s inspired house together. And when I move in with my partner, Jack, she will stay living in this beautiful 40s house for as long as she wants to. And she, like you, she's just cracked it. She's just cracked that key to happiness, which is do you and don't worry
Absolutely.
about what anyone else is doing. Mm,
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
mm.
That is absolutely it. It's not the vintage, it's the being yourself.
Absolutely. And speaking of the incredible recognition that you have got, which is probably annoying quite a few Karens out there, what made you start a social media account? What made you find TikTok and then yeah, because you've blown up, Mrs. You're doing very well. You're almost at 1 million on TikTok. That's incredible. What how did you find it?
It's kind of funny because I've been on Instagram for, oh my gosh, 10 years, maybe longer. And I had very small account. It was just like a typical, very small account. And back in June of 2020, I hit, I think it was 1,000 followers, 1,000 followers, right? And so I jokingly, like, it's just having fun at my own expense. We're like, oh boy, I finally hit 3 digits. Yay, or 4 digits, and this is the big time. I want to thank all my followers, that kind of a thing, right? Making fun of myself and my
Yeah.
microscopic following. And so a friend of mine whose husband is a big YouTuber
Ah.
messaged me, and she said, I know you were joking, but I really think you could make. You could do really well on social media. And so she challenged me to go to TikTok and she said a video every day for a couple months. But I said, there's no way I'm going to do a video every day. So she said, we came on 5 days a week. So I do a video 5 days a week for a couple months, right? So I did my first video, and it was just it was a jar of lemonade on the front porch, and it was just like taking a video of that, and like the wind was blowing. So very low effort video, right? And that got I think it got 253 views, and I was ecstatic. Okay, I thought, oh, that is so cool, right? Well, then the next day, that evening, I was like, oh crap, I've got to do a video for tomorrow, right? Noah was taking me out for ice cream. I was sitting in the front seat of his truck, and he had run into the house to get something, and I was like, okay, I'm scrambling through my photos, right? And I had a video of my hairstyling that I had accidentally shot in time lapse, and so I put that up, did a voiceover sitting in the front seat of the car, which if you go back and listen to that, you can hear the car radio in the background. And then at the very end of it, you can hear the screen door shutting, Noah coming out and the screen door slamming, right? So anyway, so I put that video up, and it just, it got millions of views. So
Wow.
yeah, and
wow.
it was just, I was just like, first I was like in a complete panic, right? I don't know. It's a weird feeling when something goes, which you've experienced with your penny adventures, I'm sure. It's just, it's impossible to describe that overwhelming feeling that comes over you, right? And so I actually didn't put any videos up after that for maybe a week or so. And
Did it scare you off a little bit?
It did scare me. But then I jumped back on the bike, and of course that gave me a boost. That gave me like 50,000 followers or something right from the start. So that little sketchy video that I put up in 5 minutes was.
And why do you think you are so popular on social media? What do you think it is you're offering people where they're like, oh my gosh, give me more?
I don't know. You know what? I don't know. And the other thing is, although I do have something to say about that, but the second thing is, I have no idea when I put a video up. The ones that I think, oh, this is going to die on the vine. Those sometimes do very well, and the ones I think, this one's going to hit it. They don't. So I can never tell. Never tell.
The ones where I'm like, I put my heart, my soul, the script is
Yes.
tight, this is going to do so well, I can feel it, nothing.
Right.
And I'm like,
yes.
Wait a minute now. I have no strategy. Nobody knows what they're doing on this app, Diane. I'll tell you that now. Nobody knows.
I don't know. Because like you said, I can pour my heart and soul into something, take 47,000 different camera angles and take an hour and a half worth of footage and whittle it down to 90 seconds, and it'll get, it'll.
And then the ones where you're like, oh, I'm just going to do that quickly because I just haven't posted. I better just give them something. And then boom. It's like, how the hell? Why did that do so well? I didn't even try with that one. It's bizarre. With your content, let me tell you, I'll tell you why you're doing so well. Because you're far too humble, honestly. Your content, I think it really does something for people where it gets them right in their soul. And it taps into a level of safety and comfort that in this modern world, which is so noisy and complicated, I think people are yearning for. Do you feel that people are yearning for, is it that people are yearning for the past? Is it that people are yearning for safety, nostalgia, comfort?
Safety and comfort. I would say I will tell you one thing. When I started doing my videos, my assumption was that I was just going to be doing like plus size vintage fashion, vintage housewares, that kind of thing, right? And the comments that I got over and over again that broke my heart were so many people saying, no one's ever talked to me like that. I didn't know people were really like this. Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I might cry about this, but that's when it hit me and I was like, there's not a lot I can do, right? I live a very quiet life. I'm at, you know, and there's not a lot I can do to make the world a better place. But I can be kind. I can be kind. And so that's what fuels me are those people that say, or people that are like, I have nobody. I have nobody to talk to. I have nobody that encourages me. So many people. And there's an epidemic too, I think, of grandparents and parents cutting off their young people that are choosing to live different lifestyles, or I shouldn't even say that are living their reality, at which the grandparents and parents find difficult in some way. And so they're cutting off. It just boggles my mind, but they're cutting them off, and these poor young folks are left to drift.
I agree. I mean, like I always find it interesting when the saying, "Blood is thicker than water."
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that means blood, as in family, is the most is paramount, is the most important. But what it actually means is the blood you shed on the battlefield with your brothers in arms is thicker than the water of the womb. So actually,
Wow.
it
The
means that the
opposite.
people you choose, yeah, it's the opposite what people think. It's the people you choose to be in your life that can sometimes be the most important because, like you said, sometimes family lets you down. Biological family lets you down because they're not accepting of you living your authentic life and your authentic truth. And no wonder when you feel in such a lonely space do they see your face and they must just feel at home because that's what you do, Diane. You make people feel like they've come home.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's
So
invaluable.
affirming
It's
to
invaluable in
me.
today.
So I appreciate that, Hannah, greatly.
It really is true. I mean, I don't, because I think there's a certain rise at the moment of, I don't know if you would term yourself as this, but are you you're not a character, but comfort characters or comforting people. You're a comfort person, I think, for a lot of people, where they they go to your content to feel, to feel comforted. And you do that so brilliant. I mean, like you say, you didn't set out to
No, I
do that. You
didn't.
were set out for fashion and
Yeah.
homeware,
Right,
right?
exactly, and it was just, and now I feel like the fashion and homeware, it's a big part of, it's part of the whole package, but I feel like that's more of like a supporting thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a supporting actor, but the main event, I think, is what you offer people in here, which, and you genuinely do it beautifully. I
Well,
mean,
thank you. I
because a lot of
appreciate
people
it very
are,
much.
you are more than welcome. Because I think a lot of people are facing real challenges in the modern world. I mean, what challenges do you think? I mean, without, obviously you don't have to say any of the messages, from the messages you get from knowing young people yourself, what challenges do you think they are facing now that maybe we haven't come across before?
I think there is so much pressure on young people, and there is no respite. Like when I was growing up, there were the bullies at school, and my parents put pressures of various kinds on me and things like that. But there was always respite from it. The vast majority of your life, like when you're alone in your bedroom or you're whatever reading books, or even when you were in class, those were periods of respite from all this pressure. But now, because of social media and because of the intensity of life, young folks get absolutely no respite. And if their parents are not supportive, if their grandparents or parents are rejecting them for one reason or another, then they have nobody, and they have there's no relief. And I think they don't even realize fully because it's all they've known.
That's so sad. I think you're right. I mean, even I put like so much pressure on myself, like so much pressure, because if I want to compare myself to somebody, I can just do it instantly by looking on my
Right,
phone,
exactly.
and I can see who's doing better and who's more successful, and like those older women who watch you and you know they leave those comments. They're doing the same. We're all comparing ourselves to each other, forgetting that we're all on an individual journey and
Yes,
it's not a race.
exactly.
But young people are growing up with social media, growing up with apps. There's an app for everything now, and I think it's disconnecting people from community.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
people.
disconnecting them from themselves, honestly. And
What do you mean by that?
um, all right, let me try and articulate. I'll explain by saying I took a week off social media between Christmas and New Year's,
Yeah.
and barely even picked up my phone. Okay. And in that time, I could feel like my brain relaxing and my whole body relaxing. And I was drawn to all the little things I love. And young people don't have that. They don't have that. There's no, they always have that pressure on them. I don't know. I'm not being very articulate, but because if you always have somebody in your face saying, this is somebody who's doing it better. This is some girl who does makeup better than you. This is some girl who's got a better body than you. This is some girl who's got better clothes than you, more money to spend, whatever, right? Then you're never really able to, you're always looking at that and feeling your lack. Or conversely, like if you look at people that you're good at makeup and they're not as good as you. You're always putting yourself in this, continuing. You're never able to
Yes.
be like, oh, this is what I really enjoy. This is what I'm good at. Regardless of how you compare in that whole continuum.
In looking to other people all the time and looking at social media, you're never looking inward, you're never looking at yourself, so you're not appreciating what you've achieved, and
Right.
you're never going, oh, well done, you've
Right.
done good there.
And I think it's
And you are forgetting what makes you joyful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the human condition to always be like when you're in fourth grade and you're in a classroom, you're looking at all the other kids and you're placing yourself in, well, okay, I'm probably smarter than these kids, but I'm not as smart as these kids. I'm prettier than these girls, but I'm not as pretty as that girl, right? So that's part of the human condition. But it's one thing when you're doing it with 30 kids that right? And you're like, yeah, she might be prettier than me, but her dad's a drunk, right? You know what I mean? So you're able to, and I say that as somebody whose grandfather was an alcoholic. I don't say drunk as I'm putting them down. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you were able to do it and do it within the context of reality, right? And social media is not reality. So you're
No, I
placing
have to
yourself
tell
on this
myself that.
continuum of, yeah.
Absolutely. I have to keep reminding myself that it isn't like that. Like you said, that everything comes with context. Like, just because someone's successful in one area, they could be having a really bad time at home. You just don't know. And I think we're in a world now where, are we just living like by like? Like sometimes I feel like I'm just looking at videos and just like, and I'm judging my own success and my own self-worth by how well content has or hasn't done, which is so silly. I feel like going to
It's
myself, but
so
I
hard
what
though, Hannah. And I fall into that myself. And that's actually what after taking that week off, I had not taken a single day off in almost 3 years from social media.
whoa.
Yeah. I had not taken a single day off, even though I take my weekends off. During the weekends, I was either editing or writing voiceovers or, all that, all the stuff that goes into it. And
Oh yes.
I'm a boomer, so I'm slow. So to make a 1.5 minute video, it takes me 10 or 20 hours, right? So
Yeah.
I had not taken a single day off, and then I took that week off, and I was like, yeah, this is what I realized how much pressure I'd been putting myself under and how I was not allowing myself to do that, just living my life, my true life, right? And so I've switched. I used to do 5 videos a week. And now I'm doing 2 videos a week. Last week I just did one. But I'm just focusing on making really good videos and not putting myself under that pressure of, which I'm sure you know, like, oh my God, I've got to put something up tomorrow. What the heck am I going to do? Right? I'm not that pressure.
Absolutely.
I'm relieving myself 100% from that. So,
I'm going to take a slice of that and apply it to myself, because like these podcasts, yeah, these are wonderful chances for people to connect, but if I take nothing from them, then what were they ever for? And I'm going to take a slice of that for myself, because I do panic. I get creative fatigue. I get burnout,
yes,
and I feel pressure. I feel
yes.
pressure to not put videos out because people enjoy it, and I'm thinking, and sometimes I think, what am I doing this for anymore? It's gotten like with you, you've gotten so big now. I bet, like thinking back to that first video in the car where you were doing a voiceover, I bet that feels like a million miles away now, because now you're almost at a million. And
Well, you know what? Actually, I was talking to my daughter. My daughter does a lot of the back end stuff. That's the thing people don't understand either. Like at one point, before I did any ads or anything, I was like, "This is costing me money to do this Instagram." And people are like, "Oh, that's ridiculous. How does it cost you money?" But once you get to a certain size, you can't manage all of that back end stuff. You can't, and at least I can't. I'm sure there are wonderful young folks with more elastic minds than mine that can. But you know what I've discovered, and I discovered this early on when I started taking weekends, when I took weekends off, is that's like the opposite of what they tell, at least back then. Back at that point, that was when they were saying you should be putting up 2 or 3 videos a day on TikTok. You should never, and so, but I never found that it cost me, or it impacted my reach or any of that kind of stuff, taking those 2 days off, right? Every week.
really,
Yep. Never impacted at all. And now that I have concentrated on producing quality videos and fewer of them, those videos, I'm
mm,
still getting the same amount of views per like week,
yep.
but those videos are getting more views and more interaction and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I if I were to give anybody advice, I would say find the place where you are comfortable. Okay?
Yeah.
Find it and don't be like, oh, this person says you have to do this many this of this a week and you have to do that. Just find where you are comfortable, because that's where your creativity is going to sing and where you're going to be able to produce the quality content, and quality content is that's the name of the game, right?
And did you find it? I mean, you mentioned a little bit like getting your head around the tech. So, has it been easy? A vintage gal like yourself, using a very modern app like TikTok, like how is the editing life? Do you sleep or no?
I actually love the editing. And
Yeah,
I feel like, there's a lot of old people that do crossword puzzles and that kind of thing. This is my crossword puzzle, right? To keep my brain
I love that.
functioning, yeah. And I love
Yeah,
that. I mean, I am slow at it. I'm not going to lie. I'm sure, like when Vinty comes to visit me and he's like, "Let's sit down on the porch and cut videos." And I'm like, "Okay." And so he'll do his video in I don't know, 45 minutes or something. He'll be done. And
yeah.
I'll still be, like in the very early processes. So, yeah, but I'm happy I can do it.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think it's just knowing when you need to like, maybe take a breather from it to revisit that creative space where you feel like you're vitalized enough to keep producing, quality content. And your content like touches on quite a few things that I find interesting. The idea of self-sufficiency, which I'm a big advocate for, and also the idea of, well, let's start with that. I mean, do you have any tips or tricks of how people can be more self-sufficient at home?
I try to um, use what I have instead of buying.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the biggest thing. And things can be used in so many different ways. Like a mason jar can be used, instead of Tupperware, and a mason jar can be used instead of a vase. If you look at, whatever you've got, you know. So I would love to get rid of
Absolutely.
all the plastic in my house, but that's an ongoing endeavor.
Oh, I agree. If I ever do buy anything on Amazon, it just breaks my heart how much packaging is around the bloody item
Right?
I've bought.
And all the plastic bubbles and everything inside
Yes.
to protect
Calm down,
something that's
Amazon.
not even breakable, right?
Yes, exactly. And it'll be this big. I don't
Yes,
understand it at all. It doesn't make
yes,
any sense to me. It doesn't
yes,
make any sense to
absolutely.
me.
I ordered a charging thing for my Kindle, and it came
Yeah.
in, the box was like literally this big, but it came in a box like this big with all this
Yeah.
plastic bubbles inside of it. I'm
Yeah. Amazon
like,
needs to chill. They need to just
yeah.
relax. And another thing about your content that I love is another thing that you sort of you might not realize you're teaching it, but I think you are, is ways in which people can find happiness and peace in solitude, and happiness and peace in being alone, and with their own company. And you've touched on this a little bit, finding peace with yourself. But for anybody out there who might be struggling to get comfortable with themselves and find happiness and peace, irrespective of everybody else out there in that noisy, bloody world, would you have any pieces of advice, pearls of wisdom for them that might help them start that journey?
I think that the secret to peace is appreciate, and this is so trite, okay, it's already come out of my mouth and I was like, I'm sure people are going to roll their eyes, but it's appreciating what you have, right? And even in, like, I remember back in my really hard years when my kids were very young, and just marriage had just disintegrated, and I was left with a house full of kids, and I had to go, I worked in a very demanding job, and I can remember sitting in my car with my paper cup of coffee before going into work, right? And having my sit and stir time where I remember one day when the rain was coming down and just watching the raindrops come down on the windshield of my car and having my warm cup of coffee. And that gave me enough beauty to hold on to and to sustain me through that day,
Wow.
and so now it's easy. Now I have hours of time and I'm surrounded by beautiful things I love and all that. But I hearken back to that. Those tough years were my learning years, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. My sit and stare time, because I love the sit and stare time concept. I've always loved that. Is when I let my pigeons out and I just sit and
Oh,
stare and watch them fly, and that's a real moment of peace for me. And I don't think people do sit and stare enough. Well, we do sit and stare. We sit and stare at our bloody phones
yeah.
far too much.
Yeah, I think people a lot of the time, like, people will often say, "Oh, I've done this for years," and what they do, I think, is what I used to do it too. Like, you've got all this demanding stuff ahead in your day, right? And so you're sitting with your coffee and you're just taking that moment, but you're doing it just almost out of a feeling of desperation. Like, I'm taking this, I'm taking a few minutes before I have to go face all that. But instead of doing that, instead of celebrating that moment, instead of feeling like this is desperation, I'm just holding tight to it, just being like, okay, I'm going to notice the beauty. I'm going to notice the cup. I'm going to, you know what I mean? It changes everything, and it changes your whole mindset to one where you are looking for the beauty that's around you, looking for the calmness that's in yourself, right?
Yeah. It's a very mindful way of living, isn't it? So it's like you're re-anchoring and you're rooting back into the here and now, which people don't do, as much. And I don't mean the here and now as in people who are living like it's the past. I don't mean like as in present, past, and future. I mean right here and now, like the senses and like, because I have anxiety, and I can get very panicked, and
Right.
sometimes, yeah, just remembering where I am and what's around me and taking
Hmm.
that moment can
It's
do
very
you the
grounding.
world of good.
And also,
Yes.
when you're looking for the beauty, right, you're not, because it's easy to have that feeling of like impending doom, like, you know, right? And so when you take and you consciously, gently, but consciously allow yourself, direct yourself to focus on positive things, like beautiful things that are around you, something that you're looking forward to, things like that, then, it's such a gift to yourself, right?
Do you think there is enough? Do you think we gift ourselves enough? What I
Oh
mean,
my
what's do
God,
you think
no.
we have self-care?
No,
No.
I don't think so. And that's another shocking thing to me too that I've discovered is that people don't, it's like a revelation to people to even take a few minutes for yourself,
Mm.
you know? Yeah.
It's true. What you're doing is controversial. It so shouldn't be, but it is. I think that's why, I mean, many reasons, but one of the reasons you've been so successful is because you are personifying what is severely lacking in this world, which is just taking it at a steadier pace, taking life at a steadier pace and appreciating and feeling grateful for what is literally around you, not what you're going to aspire to be, not focusing on what's already been and gone, but just being thankful for today's cup of coffee.
Right.
It's inspirational, Diane. It's inspirational for
Thank you
people.
so much. You're so kind.
It's true. I'm only speaking on behalf of the 901,000 people that follow you because I know they'd all want to say this to you. You need to be protected at all costs because you are
Oh,
just,
I love that
you're
when the
absolutely,
young folks say that. That's so cute when they say that. So,
but you deserve it because you bring such a value to
thank
people's
you.
lives and you'll never meet half of them. You'll never meet
Um,
any of them really, to
yeah,
be honest.
yeah.
And it's so important because it is a noisy, complicated world, and I think
Mhm.
things are getting harder
They are.
for younger people. I
Yeah.
mean, this is a controversial question. I don't think it has a very
Mhm.
simple answer, but I am asking it in this podcast.
Mhm.
Do you think the modern world makes people depressed?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that we've gotten so, and I'm not one of those people, I'm not like a Luddite saying, social media is inherently evil and we should, that's not my message at all.
Mm,
But I do think that I feel bad, I feel compassion for young folks who that is so much of their world, right? Their
yeah.
phone is so much of their world, and social media is so much of their world. And that's not on them. I don't blame them. I blame my generation, right? For
Why?
because we are the ones that set this fire wheel in motion, right? Without putting, and having the greed, okay, to not put any protective guardrails in place. I
Mm,
think my generation has a lot to answer for, and I think my generation has created the mess. They wanted to increase their own power and wealth, and so they haven't set those guardrails in place that would protect the young people that are coming up.
Do you think the generational divide is wider than when you were younger and you looked up to people who were older than you? Do you think the gap is wider now? Do you think we're struggling to relate to each other more? Are we fighting more? Are we not getting along as much? I mean, what
I
compared
hear
to
that,
maybe
but
when you were a
that
teen?
is not my experience whatsoever.
No.
No, not whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I find you give young people the tiniest little nugget of tiniest little crumb of kindness, and they just like I'll give you an example. I was out heading out yesterday, and my garland over my front door was sagging down, and of course I'm 5 foot tall, and I couldn't reach it, right? And there was two
Are
boys.
you 5 foot?
Yeah, I'm short.
Oh,
I'm
you are
short.
so
I am
sweet. Oh,
literally like I'm a little teapot, short and stout. That's my song.
brilliant. That's just, oh my God. That's given me such joy knowing that information. Just
If
like
we ever
my
meet,
little
you will
teapot
see.
Diane.
Yep, that's me. But, and there were
Oh.
two boys walking by, kind of rough looking boys. And I said, boys, could one of you help me? And of course, they were the sweetest. They were like they jumped over themselves to come up and fix my little garland on the porch. And then when they left, they were like, "Have a nice day," blah 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 blah. And you could tell, and they were happy. They were happier having extended that kindness to me, right? And I find
Yeah.
that almost, like I said, the meanies are the old ladies for me, which of course that's not a
Yeah.
generational thing. That's
Well, maybe that's what's perpetuating this notion that maybe I had that like generations aren't getting along as much as they used to, and maybe the generational gap is wider than it's ever been before. But maybe that's because I'm seeing the parts of it where there's anger and not the parts of it
Yeah.
where there's beautiful relationships being forged. I mean, I've had many intergenerational friendships in my life. My grandpa was my best friend, um, and I was also very, very, very good friends with this chap called Vic. He was in his 90s, and he'd served on the Dunkirk beaches, and
Oh,
we were really good friends. We
wow.
used to meet up. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And and Rosa, who sold me this house, she was in her 90s, and I've never found it to be a challenge to relate to somebody that was not of the same time as me. And I agree with you. I don't think young people my age and younger, I don't think we do find it difficult. I think there's other people perpetuating that we're all warring and that we don't like each other, when actually that might not be the
Yeah,
case.
I will say this. I did a post and I had gotten a lot of messages from women my age, kind message, and they were like, "Oh, what would advice would you have for somebody who wanted to start doing social media?" Right? So I did a post, and one of the things I said was, and I was speaking as an older person, like you cannot. Times have changed, and you cannot expect to be treated with respect just on the virtue of your
Mm.
age for the most part. That's just, you have to accept that you give respect, you get respect. It's not going to just come at you. You can't treat these young people like dirt and then expect them to respect you just because you're older. That's not the way the world works anymore, right? Oh my God,
Oh
they
wow.
were so angry. But because back when I was young,
Mm,
that was the way it was. You treated older people with
yes.
respect unfailingly, no matter how awful they were,
Yes.
right? But that is not the world. So I think these people, these other people, they're like, well, this is not fair. I treated awful old people with respect when I was young. Why won't they treat me with respect now?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a change. So that might be
yeah.
part of it,
Mm,
that some older people are expecting a level of respect
mm,
because they delivered that to older people when they were young. So they expect it
yeah.
now, and then when it doesn't come back, they lash out.
Well, that's what I love about you, because to say, you've got this beautiful vintage vibe, and this is a hashtag that's very overused. You certainly don't have those vintage values. You are so open and you're so progressive. Do you find that people don't assume that of you because of the way you dress? Do you think they're going to think you're a bit stiff upper lip, and then
I
you kind of
think
maybe surprise them?
they used to, and like some people are like when they see a Black Lives Matter thing or something like that, they will get angry and upset and
Yeah.
like be like all huffy and post about how they're going to unfollow me, and I'm like, bye.
I get the
Yeah,
same thing,
yeah, I
if I
bet you
start
do.
talking about LGBTQ. I think I think people assume that I'm, very, very, Britain first and all
Mm-hmm,
this, because
mm-hmm.
I'm a British girl, I'm a white girl,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking about the 1940s. And I
Right.
think, but the thing is, we don't want those kind of people in our following because it's not the right space for them
Exactly. They're
anyway.
not going
So,
to be
they
happy.
just need to move
Yeah,
on.
that's what I've
Yeah.
said. I've commented back and I've just been like, in fact, I did a video on it. And I said, you know what? If you want to unfollow me, that's fine. I encourage you to unfollow me because you're not going to be happy here. I don't get so much people who expect me to be a certain way, but I do
Mm.
get a very large older white lady population who are like, why can't you just leave all that aside? Why can't you just be the, post all the good feeling stuff and not post that stuff? And I'm like, because I don't want to.
Absolutely. And wouldn't our lives be easier if we were just the touchy feely stuff? But you know what? When you're gifted a platform as large as ours, I mean, yours it's just growing so, wonderfully, exponentially since you started. How can we not talk? We're not one faceted. We're not just weird vintage women.
Right,
And I think
right.
people I think followers are very much like, just give me that.
Yeah,
That's all I
yep,
came
yep.
here
That's all I
for.
want
I
for
get that.
that one part of you.
Yep. And I'll give that to you. You can have that, but forgive me. I'm a fully rounded person as well, and I have views and I have feelings, and it's not just weird vintage girl.
And don't you feel like it's a responsibility? Having a larger platform is a responsibility, and it's a responsibility. You have the responsibility to use that to speak
Hmm.
truth to people who might not want to receive it.
Massively. Massively. Because if we're not going to speak up with the size of our following, how can we expect
Right.
anybody else
Right.
to?
Exactly.
Well, I'll just bring this to a close with one question for you, Diane, that I've been dying to ask. So, and you've kind of answered it a little bit there, because I agree. I think in social media we gatekeep a lot of things and we don't like really connect with each other as content creators, and that's why I'm so excited to do this podcast, because it's not just nice to see your beautiful face, that gorgeous smile, and have a nice chat and a cuppa. It's actually nice for me and my sanity to connect with people doing a similar thing and who are on a similar journey. Because I think we're all on social media is a lonely world. Weirdly,
It
it's a
is.
lonely world when you're a content creator, because you're doing all that content
Absolutely.
by yourself, usually, aren't you?
Yep, absolutely. Like a lot of people will say, "What does it feel like to have, blah blah blah?" And I'm like, "It doesn't feel like anything because I'm here in the house and my life is unchanged."
Yes,
And that's a good thing.
yes,
I'm not complaining, but still, it's not like I'm having interactions, real time interactions with all these people.
absolutely. I'm
So
just spending a Saturday afternoon, making a cup of tea on camera. It's not changed my
yeah,
life at all.
yes, yes, exactly, exactly. And it's
So,
hard
yeah.
too because there's this mistaken idea among
Mm,
content creatives that we're like in competition with each other, right? But
yeah.
in reality, we it's like a tree. It's not like two sticks parallel, right? That we're competing against. It's like a tree, and the more connections and branches we
Mm,
make, the better. Social media,
absolutely.
yeah. It's not like if they watch your video
Mm.
that they're not going to watch my video, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
If
I had
they
a guy
watch
at
your
work,
video,
and he was like,
go
"Oh,
ahead.
I think there's this girl on Instagram copying you because she's vintage and she owns a pigeon, and like, she's all into 40s and 50s fashion." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, her name's Becca. She's an ambassador for Penny's Pigeon Aid, and I'm having her on the podcast." And he was like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah, we're not in competition here. We're
Right,
connecting. It's
right,
wonderful.
right.
It's
Yeah,
great."
yeah. And I don't know why. And it's a it's a growth process, I think.
Yeah.
And many content creators are still in that competition
Yeah.
mindset.
It's not
And
healthy and it's not worth it.
and it's not truth either because the more if they watch your video, then they're more likely to watch my video, and vice versa. And if they watch your friend Becca's videos, then they're more likely to watch your videos. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that little sick pigeon chose you, right?
Yeah.
And how many people would have been like, oh yeah, even most people would have been like, ew, gross, okay?
Yeah.
But how many people, even kind people, would have done what you did, right? And I think it just those little things like that, those little momentary choices that people make,
Yeah.
like that was just a choice you made in the minutia of your life.
It
And
really was.
it tells your character.
You
It
know,
tells your
so many people have pointed out that what I did for Penny, like in these podcast interviews, and it means so much to them, because like you say, it's like you said it best about just being kind. If there's one thing we can do on this earth, it's to be kind. And one of my
right.
favorite quotes is, "No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted."
Mm,
And
that
she
is
changed
good.
she changed my life, that little pigeon, and it's just
Mhm,
it's just wonderful to connect
mhm,
with somebody on that same sort of wavelength as me. So
mhm.
thank you so much. You've been an absolute a dream, and I just adore you. I just think you're bloody wonderful.
Well,
I think
I
you're.
adore you.
And what is
Yeah.
next for Diane on your social media journey? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about maybe getting a bit of an affiliate group together, which is with other content creators, which is
Mhm,
so wonderful to connect. And
mhm.
have you got any particular goals for your channel? Just maybe personal goals that you'd like to achieve?
I am very weird in that way because I actually had a lot of book companies, very large book publishers, reach out to me, like last year about doing a book, and I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? That's I no. So and I turned them down. So it's not like I would be different if I was like your age, and I
Yeah.
was going to make this into a career and all that kind of thing. But that's not me. I want to be able to continue to create content, but also keep. Oh, you're kidding. Oh,
Told you
he
I'd
looks
get her.
so like. I'm so glad you did. Looks like my Monroe, but
Oh.
without the birthmark.
Oh.
But
Sorry, yeah.
so It's different. I think it's a different thing for me at my stage of life. It's just I want to be able to continue creating content, but I also want to have my peace, and I'm not willing to sacrifice my peace to have any. I'm not, I don't want to have a big empire. I want to get to that million on TikTok just because I want it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't even really care if I grow that much anymore. I'm in a nice place, right?
Absolutely. And long may you stay there, and long may Chubby Vintage Nana content reign, and you'll hit that million. I know you will.
I
I've
hope so. I'm
Oh,
only a
you
few
will.
thousand away.
Exactly. Come on, everybody. We can do it. Get Chubby Vintage Nana to a million.
Push me over the
Yes.
edge.
Diane, it's been an absolute delight talking to you.
Oh,
Thank you so, so very much.